When you have a failure, you have to learn the lessons so that you don't repeat them.
Discourse of renewal.
There it
corporate learning, man.
And then all the way up the chain is ultimately someone in the top of the C-suite, if they were to hear this story and understand the story and understand that someone in their corporate chain really fouled up and you pay them a good amount of money because of the title that's associated with them, then again, dedication to protocol, training, process, the whole nine.
Man.
Welcome to the Golding Group Neo Marketing Podcast, a bi-weekly discussion of best practices, latest trends, and modern techniques for professional business communication, including advertising, marketing, digital channels, social media, public relations, and alternative options.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Neo Marketing Podcast. My name is Kyle Golding, here with my co-hosts, Pritchard, the professor, APR PRSA Fellow. And that is very important today, Pritch, because I'm putting you to the test for 3 different PR disasters.
Okay, this is where I leave.
One is not public. We're going to do our best to talk about it without outing anyone because it hasn't come to light yet. But there is a ton of things that the corporate entity did poorly that I know that you'll be able to jump right in and say, no, here's the proper response. So number one. Number two, we're going to talk about 2 other, one for sure, the other one hopefully if we have enough time, very public missteps. Number 1 by Burger King, and number 2 by March Madness, the NCAA basketball tournament.
Okay.
If we have time for that one, hopefully we do. So let's start here. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of background on our first PR disaster. It's a customer service PR training disaster. Give you some quick particulars so we can get up and running. But you have to understand the size of the business and their capability, and that they should be much better at this. Without naming them, we're not going to name them. This is an ongoing thing. The person who told me this story, it happened to her. She hasn't decided how this is going to play out yet as far as the aggrieved person here. So we're not going to tell anyone's names or who this is. But what you can know is that the business is a large retail public business. It is big enough and they are capable enough of having any sort of training systems, programs, protocols, etc.
Right.
So there's no excuses of being too small of a business or a mom and pop or they've never experienced this before. They definitely have experienced this exact same thing before, but at every step they made the wrong step. I'm going to start describing those wrong steps. Right. You're going to stop me and tell the audience listening to the podcast the proper response for crisis communication, customer service relations in this scenario. So the person I know came in and bought one item, a regular item that they sell here at this place, puts it on the counter. Young man comes behind the counter, rings it up, slides it back to her, and attempts to walk off from the cash register area. And she would like a bag, and she asked properly, "May I have a bag for this?" And this person is very well spoken. I don't think there was any sort of misinterpretation. She's not one to be hard to understand. She's very easy to understand when she speaks. She's very clear and very direct. Obviously, the cashier person did not appreciate being asked for a bag because he sort of grumbled in his response and kind of tossed the bag at her instead of putting her product in the bag and handed it to her in a lovely way. So as a consumer, she felt disrespected, and she didn't really appreciate it very much, but she was going to leave, but he continued to sort of grumble under his breath to a point where she felt he was being disrespectful, and she said something about his lack of respect. His response to her was to flip her the bird.
Oh my God. You're fired. That's the right answer to that
Step one, it should have ended right there,
Jeez.
Right? So in front of the public, other customers in the store, and directly to a person who had just made a purchase, he makes this vulgar gesture to her as he continues to walk away from her.
Okay.
Does not want to talk to her and definitely doesn't want to hear her input on the transaction. Obviously, she's taken aback by this and then is angered by this. So she decides, to give him a piece of her mind, and since he's walking away from her, she will just follow him and find a manager.
Okay.
Now, it's a small relative footprint on the location. So what you would think the manager would be there in 5 seconds took maybe 30 seconds. But eventually the manager comes out, has not witnessed what has happened yet,
Right.
but is the manager.
Right.
And this person proceeds to tell the manager, she asked for a bag, employee was unhappy, employee flipped her the bird. Okay. Other people are standing there in the area nodding along as if, yes,
Yep.
we saw,
That's
exactly what we saw as well.
Okay.
So the manager's been presented a plausible scenario by an employee who is not engaged in this conversation, has left the area because he doesn't want to be a part of the conversation. And the manager gets a deer in headlights freeze response.
Yep. Okay.
So he's providing nothing
Right.
for the consumer, who now is very upset about her treatment.
Right.
And being backed up by other consumers in the store.
And at the very least, I mean, the simple thing to say is,
Here it comes.
I did not witness this, but I will definitely investigate this. I'm so sorry for your inconvenience. I'm sorry for the attitude of our employees, and please take from me my guarantee that we'll fix this.
Acknowledgement and a little bit of empathy.
That's it.
That's all she was looking for.
Yep.
It could have ended there,
Right?
but it didn't.
But it didn't. Dun, dun,
The manager
dun.
did not know how to respond, and so therefore the escalation continues. How does it escalate? The employee comes back and is now unhappy that he is being talked about
Okay.
and is raising his voice
Well,
and is being aggressive.
this kid needs to go someplace else to work.
So the next thing, as a consumer, the next option you have, and it happens very often these days, and we could talk about the speed of the way these things happen now instantly, but she pulls out her phone
Okay.
to document the process because she now understands it's not going to be taken care of by the manager right there on the spot.
Right.
So she pulls out her phone, hits record on the camera.
Right.
This makes the aggrieved employee even more upset.
Okay.
The manager still has done nothing.
He's still standing there.
The employee has raised his voice.
Yeah.
He's now using foul language.
Oh, dear.
Here's where it gets, here's the best part. Watch Pritch's face when I say this. He reaches over and takes her phone out of her hand physically.
Somebody call 911. That's assault and battery.
It is a crime, ladies and gentlemen. Whether you agree or not, the letter of the law is, by that action, he has assaulted her.
Yep.
By touching her in a manner and by removing the phone from her hand. It gets better, Pritch. He throws her phone across the room.
Oh, now we're talking about destruction of property.
Another crime.
Another crime.
This has happened. Other people, other shoppers are now coming over to see what's happening.
Right.
All of this is in a video that's now flown across the room.
Right.
The manager has still done
nothing.
So what's your expectation of the manager at this point?
You should have said something earlier. Right now, you got to de-escalate the situation, right?
His job is to take charge of the situation.
Absolutely.
The person working for him is under his charge.
Absolutely.
And it is his responsibility to diffuse the situation, yes? Yep. And now it's gone from a motion, a hand gesture, to verbal, to now physical contact.
Right.
This is a bad tract.
This is a really bad track.
Right. Other people in the business, shoppers, are being involved. Someone nearly gets hit by the phone flying across the room.
Right.
People now are coming over not to be curious about the argument, but to be curious what potential crime might happen.
Right.
So this young man has now assaulted this woman in their location while wearing the uniform of the business with the manager in his presence.
Yep.
This is bad.
This is horrible.
Still no response from the manager. Another customer brings the phone back over to the person who was taken from.
Right.
And they are apologizing to her for her having to go through this.
Right.
As people visiting the business.
People there.
Just human beings who understand that this is poorly done.
Right.
So now, as a person who's had their phone taken from them, who has been assaulted, she has several options, but she chooses personal safety and she leaves. Walks out the door, very unhappy, very shaken by this event.
Sure.
Other people in the store are making comments as well. The manager still essentially does nothing. So some people would have called the police right then, and some people seeing it happening might have, in some instances, called the police.
Right.
Some people might have even stepped up and maybe thought they wanted to teach that young man a lesson themselves physically.
Right.
I don't really advise that in every situation, but I understand the impulse.
Right. Of course.
She leaves.
Right.
She goes home. She watches back the video on her phone.
Right.
So the next day calls the corporate office.
Okay.
First of all, has a hard time getting through switchboard into a human being.
Right. Yeah.
Terrible.
Yep.
Second, the person who she finally gets in contact with does not know how to help her.
I'm sorry. What?
So, what is your expectation at calling the corporate office? And one other caveat here, folks. This isn't a franchise scenario where the corporate office owns this location, and they own all the locations of this business we're talking about. So, this isn't a franchisee scenario.
Right.
This is a corporate responsibility.
This is their baby.
So, she's called the corporate office, finally gets someone on the phone, a human being. She begins to tell her story. They do not know how to help her.
That's incredible.
The lack of training, the lack of preparation, even a cheat sheet if it's a receptionist or someone who just simply answers the phone, a training manual, a cheat sheet, something, or at least a job title of
basic customer service, for crying out loud.
Again, an acknowledgement that something wasn't right, and
empathy.
putting you in connection with the person who has the ability to fix or attempt to remedy the situation.
Right.
That doesn't happen.
But that you should not have gone from this person to another person. Solve the problem.
Yes. So if the person answering the phone is incapable of responding to, obviously this is something that should never happen in their stores.
Right.
Whether the account from the person other than the line is 100% accurate or not, your response should be,
we'll look into it. Absolutely. And we're sorry for your inconvenience.
And can we connect you with someone who's capable? Because we're going to assume the person answering the phone isn't a decision maker, isn't at a level where they can make an offer of gesture of any sort, but they could still at least be empathetic and understand the values of the organization.
They should get that person to the right person without saying, I'm sorry, I can't help you. It's that person's job to make this right.
Yes.
And if that person isn't the one who can make decisions, then automatically, without asking the customer to ask to speak to somebody higher up the food chain,
that's right,
make it happen.
So the worst response you could have would be, can I get your number and we call you back?
That's
what happened.
No, that's not the worst.
Well, the worst would be ignoring, but she did not get transferred to anyone in customer service, anyone in marketing, anyone in public relations, anyone in communications.
Or legal. Anybody or legal.
No one at all. No one in the C-suite. She is asked for her name and number. Okay.
Dude.
So this has been pretty bad so far, right?
Horrible.
How could it get worse?
Oh, it can.
So,
how many days went by before she heard?
There it is. Pritch knows where we're going with this. Yes, she did not get a return call that day.
Okay.
She did not get a return call the next day.
Okay.
In fact, on the third day,
72 hours,
she called back.
She called.
She called.
Not corporate.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Once again, the person you need to talk to is not available. Can I have him call you back?
We went through this once.
Yes, we did. He does call her back.
Well,
okay.
Thank heavens for small favors.
Now, this person has a title that you would expect them to have the decision-making authority to create some sort of remedy here.
Yeah.
And you would expect them to have training and, of course, what we talk about all the time, protocols in order to, no matter what the situation is, to address it as a professional, because their title is at a level, and I'm going to assume their paycheck is at a level. They should be able to do this.
Right.
So the first thing he says to her is, I just heard about this.
Now we're almost a week in.
Yes, we are.
Right.
So he just heard about this, which is an excuse. It's not helpful.
And not a valid excuse.
Right, exactly. And again, no empathy, no contrition, anything of this nature. So, but promises he will look into it.
Okay. Well, that's something.
But he attempts to end the call there.
Uh-oh.
What is he missing?
What he's missing is soothing the customer's feelings.
Yes. Also, a timeline.
Right.
And some sort of an expected outcome.
Absolutely.
You don't have to promise the sun and the moon, but you do have to promise that something can and should happen. You have to acknowledge, you have to empathize, soothing the customer, right? Letting them feel heard.
Yeah. I mean, this should be simple, right? I'm sorry you had to go through this, and I guarantee you I'll look into it and get back to you within 24 hours.
Just as quick as Pritch just said that. This is not his job. He doesn't work in this company, but he understands the proper response to a person at that level to being told that something has gone wrong in a business transaction.
Well, what he's just done is to tell your friend that money and corporate, whatever you want to call it,
the brand,
is more important
yes,
than the customer.
Exactly.
And that's
exactly what he's done.
That's not good.
So, Pritch, how could it get worse?
Oh, I don't know. An offer of a gift card?
Believe it or not, that never even happens.
Oh, geez.
We never even get to that level. He does return her call.
After investigating?
After investigating.
Quote, unquote.
But doesn't know how to rectify the situation. The person who has been assaulted says something about, well, maybe I have to call the authorities. I do have this video here on my phone. And the corporate officer responds with, well, I watched the security tape. Listen to Pritch not believe that this could happen in 2021.
I can't believe it.
Right?
Yeah.
So he watched the tape.
So what he's just said is, this is your fault.
He has, because the tape would show, as confirmed by other people in the restaurant and in the facility when this thing happened, that the young man threw the bird at her, the gesture that is unacceptable in public. Other people witnessed that he was
grabbed the phone,
raised his phone, was verbally an altercation, grabbed the phone and threw the phone. All of this was on video.
Enough evidence to convict in court.
Certainly would be, right? So again, there is no maybe something went wrong. Something absolutely went wrong.
Absolutely.
And again, he needs to acknowledge that something went wrong. And what we always talk about when we come to customer service and public relations, right? Acknowledge something happened, empathize, and then offer a solution as to how we can prevent this action from happening again in the future.
Yeah. That guy needs to read the Apology Impulse to learn how to do a proper apology.
How to do it properly, right? So tries to attempt to smooth this over without any of that, but does acknowledge that there is security footage.
Right.
And he has no answer for her. So one more time, he has the opportunity to diffuse the situation, to end the scenario, and to come to a resolution without a public relations nightmare, without a social media push, without canceling anyone via the public outrage that would come from these actions.
Right.
And as a corporate officer, fails to do this.
Well, it's just a good thing he didn't get hold of my bride.
Mine either.
Because she would have let him get away with, I'll look into it, and then not give me anything once, and then she would have gone directly to social media.
There you go. So by time this podcast airs, maybe it'll become a social media issue, and if it becomes public, we'll do a follow-up and tell you guys what happened. Mm-hmm. But again, Because
ridiculous.
From the corporate level, from the top corporate level,
Yeah.
they didn't have the prioritization on customer service, obviously. Even though their marketing would tell you that they do.
Yeah, right. Well, they just proved otherwise.
So they have not prioritized protocols and training.
Yep.
They have not empowered their employees, even at a corporate level, to address issues and to make smart decisions.
It sounds like they haven't provided any kind of guidance for any kind of customer relations.
So if this happened, if it rose to the level of assault and battery in the store with witnesses and two video sources,
right, exactly.
Do you think without training, without interaction, without fixing and making adjustments from the lessons that should be learned here, that escalation will continue on to more physical activity, violence, criminal behavior, etc., right?
Well, at the very least, that young man needs to be grabbed by the stack and swivels and told what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate.
Absolutely.
And maybe he needs to find another job.
That's just step one, though. It tells us that the manager was not trained well.
Right.
That the receptionists and the people on the phone at corporate office were not trained well and didn't have protocols in place, didn't have systems in place, didn't have support for them in their job, because this is not the only person in 2021 to call and have a complaint.
Right. Well, and even if you restrict it to conversations about the mask, you think that they're
getting plenty of that.
Exactly. And that information is just as good talking about another complaint as it is talking about the masks.
And then there's no excuse of it's above my pay grade when we get to someone who it is their pay grade.
Exactly.
And they still fail to come to a resolution that any of us would expect as the consumer in a public scenario like this.
This is incredible.
It proves large corporate entities with all the resources, if they don't put focus and value on these things, if they don't put the protocols in place, train on them, re-involve and reiterate the corporate values and all the things that come with it, that every section down the line will get weaker and weaker to a point of criminal activity.
Yeah. Well, whoever this person was at corporate should have had the courage and the guts to say, we're going to retrain that entire staff from the manager on down.
Yes.
Thank you for bringing this to our attention.
In fact, the second conversation he had with her, if it were me, if I was in that role, and I have been in this corporate role in the past, my second conversation with the person would have also included the recounting of how I went to the store physically and spoke to the manager after watching the videotapes, of course, for sure.
Right.
Spoke to the manager, spoke to the employee, or discharged that employee. Right. And that was also part of the conversation. He says, I can't tell you what we may or may not do to the employee because of his privacy rights. But a simple statement as, well, if anyone did that in my organization, I would let them go immediately is suffice enough.
Right.
And, of course, if she ever goes back into that location again and he's still there, she will not return that for a third time. There's guarantee of that.
Right.
But my recount would have been, I went, I spoke to the manager. Yeah. We did training. We let that person go. We talked about how this could have happened. Learn the lessons, right? When you have a failure, you have to learn the lessons so that you don't repeat them.
Discourse of renewal. It's corporate learning, man.
And then all the way up the chain, and ultimately someone in the top of the C-suite, if they were to hear this story and understand the story and understand that someone in their corporate chain really fouled up, and you pay them a good amount of money because of the title that's associated with them, then again, dedication to protocol, training, process, the whole nine.
Man, that time they dropped it up and down the chain.
But it's a great example for you guys to learn lessons from us here on the New Marketing Podcast. So here's example number 2. This one's public. Everyone has seen this.
Yep.
Burger King tried to get a little cute on social media. The first day of March, Women's History Month. March is Women's History Month. And they thought this would be an attention grabber that they could then turn into sort of a viral sensation that would benefit them.
Yep.
You know, when trying to go viral, you have just have the chance of screwing yourself up really bad. Well, and Wendy's, typically their social media is typically good.
It was Burger King.
You're right. almost mislabeled someone.
Wow.
The Burger King.
Dude. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Typically,
they
do a good job. They got the king and they got
kind of
good
a
stuff.
snarky voice anyway in their social
For those of
media.
you who've been living under a rock, they tweeted, women belong in the kitchen.
In the kitchen.
Then they follow, which of course is degrading and derogatory and everything you would come with that at the beginning of Women's History Month. They followed it up with scholarships to their culinary program in order to develop head chefs and people in their culinary program specifically for females.
But it was in the second tweet. It wasn't in the first tweet.
It was a series, but you could easily get that first one and think, what in the hell is this?
And that's exactly what happened.
Yes.
The Twitter storm was upon them.
So problem number one is they tried to get too cute, and they were more interested in attention than authenticity.
Well, yeah. I mean, at the very basic level, I think their heart was in the right spot.
The program they have already in place is fantastic.
And the point, if it had been clearly stated at the beginning of Women's History Month, we need more female chefs.
We support this. We have programming for this. We believe in this. But they wanted to start with a joke, and they wanted to be cute, and they wanted to get attention.
They tried to get cute. That's right.
But that's only half the problem. The other half of the problem is they got blasted. They got torn apart on social media. Did they learn their lesson, admit it was a failure, and do a 180?
I think it took them 3 days to make a comment.
Well, in social media land, 3 days is 3 years.
Right.
They failed to understand that the 99 negative responses and the one, that's funny, was absolutely not the attention they were looking for. And were needed to understand they needed to mea culpa, explain that they didn't intend it that way. We're sorry for coming off the way we did, and that it won't happen again.
Right.
It took them way too long to do that. So don't be focused on grabbing attention for all the wrong reasons. Always be focused on grabbing attention for all the right reasons, because the wrong reasons end up getting you in trouble just as quick as gaining the attention.
Right.
So now, bonus scenario, also public. Everyone saw this as well.
Sorry, I'm just going back to the Burger King statement.
Okay.
What was it they said? Well, the second portion of that message was, if they want to, of course, yet only 20% of chefs are women. So that's the message. That's solid.
That's where they should have started.
That's where they should have started.
That should have been the opening statement. But again, they tried to get cute. It's one of those things where someone falls in love with their creative.
Right. Exactly.
And I've been that guy in the past. I've been that guy as a creative director. Sometimes you fall in love with your creative and you stop and forget that you have to look at the dynamics of the situation.
Absolutely.
Sometimes the most creative idea is not the right one because it doesn't hit the audience the way it needs to.
Right.
And this one obviously failed.
It did. And it's interesting. The rest of the statement is, we're on a mission to change the gender ratio in the restaurant industry by empowering female employees with the opportunity to pursue a culinary career. Very noble. A very noble cause.
Start there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But this one, I think, is authentic to their brand. But they had another social issue that they jumped on a year or so ago on bullying.
Yes.
And
also
it had
did not come off
no
well.
connection to their brand, other than that they felt they needed to have a social cause in my analysis.
So sometimes they do good things and sometimes they screw up, and when they screw up big.
Yeah, well, go big or go home.
Good for them. Also screwing up big was the NCAA, the March Madness tournament.
Right.
The disparity between the treatment of the women's teams and the treatment of the men's teams.
Yep.
And, of course, it was Women's History Month and a lot of focus on income disparity between men and women and treatment in general. And the women basketball players in the NCAA tournament, March Madness, were given what they felt were the inferior hotel scenarios. They were given what they called a weight room that looked like a gym in your house.
Right.
And all these things. And the NCAA had to make accommodations because of COVID. The tournament's different this year than it normally is.
Yeah, right.
But they went first class for the men's programs. They went fourth class for the women's programs.
Or steerage.
They got called out publicly for it.
Yep. I also don't think they allowed the women's brackets to use March Madness.
See, that's part of the conversation too.
Yeah.
In the discussion of what many people felt was a mistreatment of the women's teams and the unfairness and inequality there, people noticed that the term March Madness and the social media handles that go along with it would only associate it with men's teams, men programming, etc. So that was part of the conversation. So the next day, the NCAA did a good job of actually understanding the public input. They improved the ladies' facilities. They improved their situation, their meals, all the things that they thought were inferior to the men's scenario. Right. The NCAA did make efforts, and in some cases made efforts enough that the initial people who crafted the initial complaint were now say, hey, this is great. This is fantastic. 24 hours later, you didn't just say you would. You did it. You upgraded our workout facilities so we can work out in between games. You upgraded our meals. You upgraded. They did all the things and didn't try to go and take too much credit for it. So they did everything right except one. They continue to not attach the women's bracket and the women's games to the March Madness hashtag and other social media elements and website, etc., that go along with March Madness. So the next day, when the story on the morning shows, Good Morning America and all those types of shows that are in the morning, instead of it being NCAA screws up, but 24 hours later they fix it and we appreciate their effort and maybe someday we won't need to make these complaints, the lead was they still don't include the women in March Madness. Because, of course, media will focus on the negative aspect because they left it, and it's the easiest thing that would have cost them zero money. The other upgrades and things they did, they had to shell out money, which they should, and good for them for doing it. But this is actually one that would have cost them nothing and have gotten them the most goodwill, but instead it's the biggest screw-up. It gets them the negativity that cancels all the goodwill they actually spent time and money on. So, details, folks.
I don't
Attention
understand
details.
Why they didn't sign that at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly.
That's historically what happens, right?
There are things that change, and there's like, well, it's different this year because of COVID, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, when the public tells you they don't appreciate what you're doing, you need to respond. And if you can respond in a way that takes nothing away from you and actually cost you nothing, there's no reason to do it. The fact that was the one thing not done just again proved that they weren't really dedicated to fixing the problem, and they didn't pay attention to details. And folks, when it comes to controversy, when it comes to crisis, when it comes to managing your brand, when it comes to creating a reputation for your brand, for your entity, the details, the small stuff, are the things that can get you over the hump or can drag you right back down into the mud. So pay attention to the details.
Pay attention to the details.
Here you goes, guys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, everybody listening to the podcast, watching the videos on YouTube. We appreciate you. We got all three of those in today.
We did.
So happy that we had this conversation. We gave you guys some tips on how you could do your PR, your customer service, and your crisis communication better. We called out a couple of these public entities who have already been getting beat up. We're jumping on them on the bandwagon as well because they deserve it. And, of course, we're teaching lessons off of that as well. We hope you guys never need this, much like insurance. We hope you never need it, but if you do, you're going to be super happy you have it. That's why we talk about it on the Neo Marketing Podcast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, get the like, the heart, the thumbs up, all those good things. Hit the bell on YouTube so that you get a notification every time there's a new video. New podcast every 2 weeks. We appreciate you guys very much tuning in. Follow us on social media. Leave a review. All of that good stuff. We appreciate you each and every episode on the Neo Marketing Podcast. Until next time, good luck.
Ciao.
This has been the Golden Group Neo Marketing Podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Tell a friend, leave a review, and engage with us on social media. Thanks for listening.